Welcome to it. Weekend editions here at Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Brandon Vogel in with Counterread, counterread.com. We are efforting our two other co-pilots shortly. Vogues, how we doing, man? Been a hell of a bowl season. I know portal madness continues, and it's UCLA, Nebraska, brother. That is something that I know you and I both love college basketball. It's been a while, 1955 since the Bruins have come to Lincoln. So that's all on the docket, man. What do you know? How's the bowl week treated you?
Pretty good, pretty good. We got one certifiably great playoff game, and a bunch of others kind of sprinkled throughout, and I think it all culminates in the one everybody's been waiting for today, the Bahamas Bowl. It's a little bit strange to have one college football game today at 11 a.m., but hey, it's it's a strange time in the sport. But to your point on the basketball front, it is exciting. Have a school like UCLA come in after teams that haven't faced off in quite a while, and a matchup that I think is pretty even overall. So it should be a good one.
Should be all right. It's going to be defensive in identity for sure. Elijah Herbel is checking it as well. And Vogues, I want to kind of focus in on the portal. We have kind of got our Pete Thamel radar up as well. We'll get our starting five shout outs as well. As Mike in Cali has been waiting since 6:07 a.m., which is 4:07 a.m. UCLA time. God love him. Elijah, how we doing, brother? Thanks for popping in.
Made it here eventually. My apologies.
No, you're good. You're good. We have an APB out for Kraynak. I got a text last night at 11:45, so that was before last call. So that's good. But folks, your latest article with Counterread touched on kind of weighing the pros and cons, the gains and losses, credits and debts, so to speak, of the portal. And Nebraska's going after quite a few targets, quite a few visitors this weekend and into early next week. The big name is Hardly Gilmore, and we know that he's a guy that's got a pretty good skill set, can get downtown, as a lot of different talents in that wide receiver realm. You lose a guy like Jalen Lloyd, and Lloyd's, for whatever reason, wasn't on the field until it mattered, i.e. making contested catches or getting deep to go catch a punt for a 60-yard touchdown against an Iowa, right? So Lloyd's production was fantastic. Let's focus in there. Tough loss for Nebraska, as Lloyd, I think, is looking at Oklahoma State, but Gilmore is a guy that has plenty of upside as well. How do you go about tackling losses and credits, quite frankly?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and the portal, well, it's been around for a couple seasons now. It's still kind of new enough that, like, thank God for the recruiting sites that track all this, because it's massive, and they're used to it. They were set up to do it because they already tracked the even bigger high school recruiting. So they all kind of have their different ways of these team transfer rankings. But the one I kind of focused on for that post on Counterread, that newsletter on Thursday, was Macaulay Sports, which I think does a really good job. It kind of boils things down to a net win number, and you can agree or disagree with any metric. That's what you should do. Consider it sort of skeptically, but it kind of gets down and basically attributes things to a win share for players. So when we look at that latest kind of quote unquote transaction for Nebraska, you add Gilmore from Kentucky, a freshman who played in 7 games, averaged over 20 yards a catch. Jalen Lloyd saw, well, I don't remember how many games he appeared in this year, but he maintained his red shirt last year. But over that stretch, like, it seemed like all he did was catch deep balls, and he's over 20 yards a catch for his career. And I think at a certain point early in the season, he was averaging 40 yards a catch for his career, because he was just that guy. Like, all he did was catch the deep balls because of his speed. So it's a little bit of a like for like. because Lloyd does have 2 seasons, in this instance, McAlee Sports rates him a little bit ahead of Gilmore. And that's kind of where I started with this, looking at not just what teams have brought in, which tends to get most of the focus, but what they lost. And when you do that for Nebraska, I put a chart in that story showing like the biggest additions by position by that rating, and also the biggest losses. And Nebraska so far, and this thing is always changing. I'll do updates as we go along. Um, had lost the highest rated tight end in terms of net wins in Borkirker, highest rated defensive lineman in Butler, and the highest rated linebacker so far in Bayer. So it's just going to be tough for a team that we know needs to cut its roster down to come out in the black using this method. But I do think Nebraska's done pretty well so far. I think they've made some notable additions. It's just they're going to have to cut more than they're going to add.
And Brandon, with a finite amount of resources in college football, which every school is working with NIL currently, eventually probably a revenue sharing model coming as well, like, with the finite amount of resources, is it just a reality in college football that there are going to be positions on your football team that you probably don't get better in the portal? Where it's like, where would you like to get better at? If you ask a coaching staff, is probably everywhere. But the reality is there's going to have to be an allocation of resources as well, where you look at, where you need to invest within your own team, similar to an NFL team in free agency, where there's going to be spots where they say, you know what, we need to invest here, and we're going to have to deal with what we have at other spots.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, if there's a consensus to be had there, it's probably still forming, based on what I've observed from the portal so far. I'd be dead set on like growing my own offensive linemen and defensive linemen if you can. I think receivers, you're always going to be able to probably do pretty well. There's going to be a lot of them available. So that's a position I'd kind of put to the side of like, okay, I think we can address things in the portal if we have to. Defensive back might be another one. Edge rusher, there's always going to be a lot of edge rushers, but the competition is going to be pretty fierce. So that's one where, I think that one comes down to a little bit of your standing in the sport as a whole. Like if you're Ohio State, Georgia, those sorts of teams, you can feel pretty confident in your ability to get anybody, but particularly those players who are, say, a proven defensive lineman at maybe the next rung down or even multiple rungs down. Like you're going to be in the hunt for that guy if you want to be. So a lot of it comes down to what kind of cachet I think you have as well, which is something that I don't know if it's ever changing in the new college football, but it's an interesting time for the sport. I almost view these seasons now, particularly starting like this year. I didn't so much view 2024 this way, as for a lot of teams, they're going to be almost hard resets, and I think that might be the case for Nebraska to a degree.
Brandon Vogel with us from counterread.com. We shouted out Mike, and Callie was in first. Mike Corrigan's here. Eat Beef. Walter checks in south of Philly, asking about Coach Ed. No news. There's a bloodlust for that poor guy out there. NASCAR Eric is here along with Tuck. Rick, good to have you. Andrew's in. Jeff Snitley, part of the Boulder Peace Treaty. Charles says, what's up? Steven is here along with Uncle Larry. Uncle Larry, good to have you back. As NU Grandpa is here all the way down in Tennessee. And Three Putt says it's 7:51. Where are you? Hey, it's all right. We'll dive into the SEC egg that's been on their face this postseason. We'll spend a little bit of time, too, on the Big Ten's flex. And guys, I want to get into, and we'll talk plenty, too, Nebraska, UCLA, because this is a big moment in a big month for Nebraska basketball with their slate, their schedule. But I am excited from a talent evaluation standpoint to have a guy like like Mosey on staff for Nebraska. I'm excited to have a guy like Simpson back on staff if I'm a Nebraska fan, not only because of the Florida connections or the Kansas City connections, but they've got former players or dudes they know that they can reach out to, and they can reach out to guys that are at big programs and also that are at some smaller programs. And I would look first at kind of the Indiana route, right? Where you're going after guys, and can you be right with your talent evaluation? Can a guy play? That's what a coach always asks themselves. Can a guy play? We think you can play, right? As we echo the late great Jack Pierce's voice in our minds here, Vogues, with, well, we think he can play. And those guys are going to have a chip. Those guys are going to be athletic. They're going to be physical. Can they step up, and can they handle the rigors of a Big Ten week in and week out in this new 105 roster? You know, how good can your depth be? Because everyone's just rating and buying your backups. And can you spend appropriately on that identified talent and be right with the identified talent? You know what? You had 2 years to be right or wrong with a high school recruit. It's now, like you said, that hard reset, man, where you got to be right and flip that roster like Prime, like Indiana, in this Wild West.
Yeah, and that's a pretty big shift, I think, from where even just 2 years ago the rule era started. And I think it's a shift from like what he said, you know, just based on him saying like, look, we're going to do this the slow way. Like, I don't know if, can you do the slow way in 2025? Can you do the slow way when Jamari Butler, a guy who emerged under you, you know, gets a chance to be a little bit closer to home, play at a great program in LSU. Who knows what the numbers were, but he didn't take less. Let's put it that way. Mekhi Bayer, a guy who emerged under this staff. I mean, that's the thing that gives me a little bit of pause with this. Is not that you're just losing good players. It's like good players who emerged under this group or this coaching staff recruited, and they're off. So when you take what I tried to do on Thursday, kind of the debit and credit approach to this, can you make that up? And in some cases, we just won't know. I think Desan McCullough is a great player. He's proven, he's produced wherever he's been. That one's like one you just put there and be like, yep, I think we kind of got back maybe what we lost, and maybe even more than that. With someone like you mentioned, Mosey, Williams Monterey, he's a really key player because from a net win perspective, like there's just not much to go on with him. Now, if you look in the transfer portal rankings that kind of come from the recruiting sites, I think they weight his talent, his recruiting ranking a little more heavily at this point, which might make sense. But if he produces, like if he becomes a 5-star type player, then it's great. It's just it's how much belief are you willing to put in that at this point? And would you rather have a Jamari Butler? I don't know if you rather would. You just know more about him.
Brandon, what does the college football playoff tell you about Nebraska with how their roster construction looks for 2025? Just in terms of that mix of in-house development and portal guys. Notre Dame among the teams in the playoff is kind of the poster child for development. But you look around the college football playoff, and the teams that are still in it seem to be the teams that are developing internally.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's as we turn the page to 2025, I'm kind of wondering if that's like the luxury of the top end of the sport now. And some of the teams that are in there that were in there this year, Arizona State kind of foremost among them, like they took a total like year one to the extent of like it's going to be bad. And nobody saw what they were going to do this year coming, but they made a bunch of good additions 2 years ago and added a guy like Scadaboo this year that really helped them. So I think hitting on a couple of key guys is what it becomes about. Now watching the playoff games, I think Penn State, Boise State was a good example. Texas, Arizona State to a degree, although Texas almost blew that one. like it's still about being good on the lines. And all of the teams, however you felt about who made it in or who didn't, like, are going to be pretty good and pretty confident at this point. At this stage, it becomes a lot about matchups. And if you got a Penn State D line, you can kind of match up with anybody. And that game with Notre Dame is going to be pretty fascinating. Um, Kind of hard to have much fault with what Notre Dame has done since that Northern Illinois loss. Marcus Freeman deserves, I think, a ton of credit for what he's done getting them to this point, but also since that loss where everyone was kind of like, well, they can't drop another one, and had basically written them off.
You look at Notre Dame's schedule, they're not top 5 wins. They don't need to apologize, but they had a ranked win each month throughout the season. Beginning with the road show to A&M, which is never easy. That place was bananas to kick off a new coaching era. They handled the service academies, really drilled them. That's hard to do with the option approach. And I know they moonlight with the ACC, which has had a really rough bowl season. But what stands out to me about Notre Dame is their safeties, and we all kind of look at Xavier Watts and go, damn, what a get for Notre Dame. Not only the foresight to win the recruiting battle, but then convince him to flip sides of the football. And all he's done is just be, a first-round guy and be an electric leader in safety. And their tackling's incredible. Their tackling's fantastic. Their defensive line rotation, their pass rush, they don't look slow and plodding. They look aggressive and decisive. They got a good 1-2 punch at running back. Riley Leonard's been good enough at quarterback with his legs and just decision making. And I'd love to see them at Ohio State. I want to see that pass rush and secondary go against the Buckeyes. I mean, I think that'd be an incredible national championship matchup. Texas, Vogues, I want to kind of dive into Arizona State not getting a chance at a game-winning field goal. You put the tinfoil hat on it all. Texas made some plays to end regulation and in overtime. They're super talented, but they're just still a shade soft, comparatively speaking, I think. On the lines of scrimmage, they're good, but they're just not as Notre Dame tough, in my humble opinion. And then you got Penn State, right? Penn State and their defense is good. They're right at that line, and they've proven to cross that line of being a Final Four squad. Can Aller take care of the football, and can they handle the moment, especially if they get a second crack at Ohio State? I mean, there's so many good storylines here moving forward.
Yeah, there are. I mean, in terms of Notre Dame, you mentioned they don't look plodding, which I think, that's the Notre Dame we were used to, the one that was good enough to make the playoffs and then just, would go and get waxed by
they got Clemson.
Yeah. And, Marcus Freeman going into the Georgia game said something that really stuck with me. He was asked what he wanted to see from his team. And he said he wanted to see him play with velocity. And I was like, okay, this is a different Notre Dame. And they do look that way. They hit, they tackle. I mean, the level of O-line and injuries they sustained to get here is remarkable. It's tough to pick against them just based on how they're playing. And I would agree with you on Texas. That Arizona State game was a bit of a strange one in that on the one hand,
should have drilled them.
Texas missed 2 field goals. So you could look at it that way and be like, well, if they just make one of those, they win that game in regulation, and that's probably it. And then you had the controversial call, which I'm guessing Bo Pelini was probably the least surprised person in the world that targeting call.
And Mangino.
Fair point. But, on the other hand, like Texas, it came down to a 4th and 13, and a ton of credit to Sark. Like, drew up a play that got them a busted coverage, and it worked. So I kind of look at, I do think Texas is probably the shakiest right now. Penn State might be next. Like, I've been impressed with what Penn State's done so far. The SMU game, you have 2 pick sixes right away. Like, that game was really in contention, even despite the SMU turnovers. if they just hadn't gone for touchdowns. So hey, took care of SMU, and then you get the Boise State draw. I mean, so far Penn State's had the best draw, and credit to them, they've taken care of business and won fairly comfortably. Even while I still look at them as probably it's Ohio State, Notre Dame, Penn State, Texas for me, in that order, which I think is probably what the lines would tell you it is. But that's a step in the right direction for Penn State based on where they've been.
Vogues, want to shift a little bit and kind of get your take on what today is. Is it just a chance at win number 20 in a row for Nebraska basketball, or is it more? And I know that was asked, and between Bryce Williams and Fred Hoiberg, you do got to treat it like another game, but it's big because I think the number this month is 6-2. I think you got to go 6-2. Illinois looks something fierce after they destroyed Oregon. They're coming to Lincoln at the end of the month. You start the month with UCLA, a team you can win, a team you're favored over by 1.5, says our friends in the desert. You've got some winnable and losable road games. Not quite sure how the road woes will go this year for Nebraska in the Big Ten. And it's just a gauntlet because there's winnable and losable games, and then there's a handful of games where you're going to have to play out of your mind. I think Nebraska's learned from the Michigan State experience where you really got to show up with a hard hat and lunch pail. That being said, what's the cast going to do? Are you going to get efficiency? I think you'll get toughness because of the energy at PBA. And I think this team did learn getting slapped by Sparty. But, what are you going to be able to do on offense? You're going to get to the free throw line. How's your paint play going to be? And, can you keep up the clip you've been on from distance? And UCLA is damn good at shutting down all three levels you want to be good at.
Yeah, they are. You and I were talking at the top of the show. You mentioned it's going to be plenty of defense for people in this one. UCLA is, I think, 4th in KenPom's defensive rating. Nebraska's 17th. So you kind of know what you're in for. I think Nebraska's ability to get to the line will be pretty key in this one. It's the Huskers' rim and 3 rate is probably lower than I think where Hoiberg would typically like it. But hey, it hasn't burned them really so far. So what today represents to me is I think it's one where you have a chance to make a statement about home court and what that could be, because this should be pretty even. I think KenPom has UCLA like 17th, Nebraska's around 39th, 40th. So it would give UCLA an edge in this matchup. But the number I typically pay the most attention to are the numbers from shot quality. And from there, it's a slight edge Nebraska. And that's just an attempt to say, like, how good are the shots you're taking? Like, some days a lot of them will go in, some days a lot of them won't. Let's try to get to the replicable part of it. So based on that, you'd have slight edge Huskers. So it should be a pretty even matchup. The line tells you that's the expectation from the models, and it's a game where I think if everything's mostly equal, if one team isn't red hot or ice cold, like is it one where Pinnacle Bank Arena and that crowd can push Nebraska over the top? And I think that's a pretty big edge for the Huskers, because if it's a tightly contested game, that's a big piece of this.
Brandon, is it too early to be talking about what Nebraska needs to do for an NCAA tournament appearance? Is it too early in the season? Because we were talking
never too early.
Like 500 in the Big Ten, with how the Big Ten looks this year, like you might have double-digit teams from the Big Ten making it into the NCAA tournament. That's kind of my feel right now. And with that in mind, I look at roughly 500 in conference play should give you a good shout for the NCAA tournament. Is it too early to be talking about that? Am I on the money there? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't think it's too early to talk about it. I mean, this team, it was there a year ago. It's the expectation. again this year, and so far, against the schedule that they've played, they've looked the part to me. So 500 in the Big Ten, yeah, that probably gets you there. I kind of like to, at this time of year in particular, look at it the way Chris did. It's like, okay, well, what do we need to do for the month of January, and what do we need to do for February? And with a lot of Nebraska tournament teams, at least in the recent past, being able to be really tough at home has been the Huskers' edge. Because look, when you're in a league like the Big Ten, you're not going to be as talented for the most part as the 7-8 teams that are probably above you on an annual basis. But how do you make that up? Well, you take care of business at home, which is part of why I kind of view today as a little bit of a chance to make a statement of, yeah, that's going to be Nebraska again.
And Bryce Williams alluded to that, making a statement, put the Big Ten on notice. And it's always difficult to see how your road record's going to be. I mean, Michigan State had a lead, blew a lead, hung on last night at Ohio State. I mean, it feels like everybody in this league they're 10-4, 11-3, where they are also good at home. And I can't really circle the teams right now that I can't in ink put down, okay, here's a road win for Nebraska. And I don't think that they won't get a road win. I don't know where it's going to be. I don't know that Maryland's a great spot to say, yeah, they'll handle that, or even Wisconsin. So you're at Purdue, and Illinois is good enough to come in and do it too. I mean, Penn State scares people. Michigan's off to a 2-0 start. Washington is not playing dead. Minnesota is problematic. Rutgers had their freshman phenom go for 38, and then they still lost by 10. And the most talented team you could argue is Indiana. And they're just, what Indiana team do you get? SC's there as well. So I think it's fascinating. I mean, your Oregon right now is 1-2 in the league, right? But they're kind of a team that you're looking at this point in the year of being a decent seed. So any surprises this weekend, Vogues, from a portal standpoint, or do you think it's going to maybe drift into next week for some Husker news dump?
Yeah, I'm guessing I'd be a little surprised if anything came over the weekend. I think we'll probably drift into next week. It's an interesting time because, previously, and like I said, I've been with the additions Nebraska's been able to make. I think they've done pretty well. But now you've kind of got the time to double down and really dig into what's in there in terms of players, and maybe go outside the guys that you can immediately get on campus. It's still crazy, the December schedule, how it shakes out. I know every coach in the world says that at this point, but if you've got a connection to a guy, or he can make just the right pitch, because everything happens so fast. Now you've got a little bit of time for a breather, and have hopefully been able to really dig in on some guys. So it should be a pretty serious push for the players who are coming to campus now and in the next couple of weeks. So I think Nebraska will have some good success. I just don't know how quick it'll be, because everybody's got so much to evaluate in terms of opportunities.
Well, Mother Nature is going to do Nebraska solid. The kids that are here this weekend, son, I don't think it's safe to leave, and I don't think you need to find your way down to that southern climate. And we're just going to take care of you here. We'll get you a bowl of chili and maybe a cinnamon roll, and watch some basketball. So,
maybe an NIL check too. Don't forget about.
Well, those are always pretty solid. Folks, tell folks how they can be a part of Counter Read.
Yeah, you can just head to counterread.com and kind of check out everything we've been up to. It's a twice weekly newsletter from myself and Aaron Sorensen. We talked a little bit about on Thursday. I kind of did my Big Ten progress report as far as the transfer portal goes. Minnesota, big winner last night in its bowl game. Gophers have done well. They're near the top. UCLA near the bottom. You can find out where everybody else kind of slots in over at counterread.com. So you can sign up as a free subscriber, try us out. That gets you 7-day free trial to look at everything we've done up to this point. And hopefully you like what you see and want to join us as a paid subscriber. You get those 2 exclusive newsletters a week.
Do it. Get signed up. Amazing work by Vogues and Aaron Sorensen. Counterread.com. Brandon, thanks for jumping on, brother.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Appreciate it. Good to have Vogues in. We say hi to the Iron Horse, Gary Sharp, with us. You are still frigid in Fargo, man. How are you?
I'm in Fargo on a Saturday. That answered your question.
So have you gone to Shields yet?
No, but you know what? The interesting thing here. So where North Dakota State basketball plays is the Shields Center.
Yeah.
And then they also have a Shields Arena where they have a USHL hockey team here. That's called the Shields Arena. So people get confused.
That's the last Nebraska hat I bought. This is when I lived in South Dakota and also got to spend January in Fargo with Dakota State. It was the highlight of the trip was there's this steak buffet joint up there. I don't know if it's still around, but it's not a Sizzler. It's not a Shoney's, but the coaches and the assistants' eyes lit up. Well, I don't know how the game's going to go or if the game plan's worth a damn, but it's all you can eat sirloin, baby. So they were fired up. That was a long time ago.
So I imagine that Fargo is nice during the summer. It's just, when you're doing basketball, you're here during the coldest months of the year. But we stay in downtown Fargo. It's a really nice area. Yeah. Like downtown Fargo is really nice.
No,
shout out Jasper Hotel where we're staying.
Is there a blackjack table downstairs?
That this hotel is nice because you have to go to a hotel around the corner to find the casino that is hooked onto it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Free drinks and get punched in the face by the dealer. I mean, it's a win. What do you believe about the SEC?
The SEC is only as good as Saban and Georgia. Okay. And that's what the narrative has been because Alabama has been so dominant. Georgia has followed suit. LSU has dabbled a little bit. So when they're good, we go, man, the SEC is dominant. I'm over the conferences. I'm into brands, and everybody is an individual brand. They just happen to play in a conference. Does the Big Ten make Ohio State better, or was Ohio State really, really good? Does the Big Ten make Indiana better, or Indiana was really, really good? I think with the SEC, it's all of this stuff, and I love that we're talking about college football, and sometimes the conversation goes the rails. But it's a 1-year sample size. What are we going to be doing next year if 3 of the Final 4 from the SEC, we're going to be like, oh, my God, they learned their lesson. But here's what's happened, I think, in college football, and we've all talked about this, is the top tier, there's never going to be parity in college football. There never has been. There never will be. We have to embrace it. Not everybody plays on the same playing field. But if you have the resources, you better play on the bigger playing field than the smaller playing field. I think the tier 1 to tier 2, that gap has shrunk a little bit, but there's nobody from tier 2 that is jumping into tier 1 and going, I'm not leaving. I'm staying here. I also think, the playing field, you can pay players now. So the SEC doesn't have that advantage. The field expanded, so their brand is a little bit scarce when you go from 4 to 12. And then let's also be honest. If you're looking at the current landscape of college football, and Michigan won the title last year, you have Ohio State and Notre Dame that are 2 of the last 4. Hey, Northern football is back, baby. If a wide receiver, which usually when you think about being a wide receiver in college and going to the NFL, you got to go to LSU. You got to go to a warm weather school. I'm going to Ohio State. What happens in Ohio State? It snows. It's cold. For a month or so, you're going to play in cold weather. So I think there's a lot of things. I don't think there's a huge shift. But I think there's some things that are brewing that I can't wait to see what the SEC pivots, because the SEC has never had to endure where people are taking shots at them and they're really struggling. So what is their next thing that is out there they will be the first to get, and then college football will try and respond?
Quickly here, Gary, does Notre Dame have it right in the 12-team era of being unaffiliated with the conference? You get the easier schedule, which I know they played some all right teams, but it's not like a gauntlet that you'll see in the SEC or the Big Ten. And then you also get to keep your payouts for playoff. How far you advance in the playoff, you get to keep your payouts to yourself. Like, does Notre Dame have it right?
Oh, they have such a huge advantage. When the committee said that they could host a playoff game, they can't be a top four, but they can host a playoff game. That was money in the bank for Notre Dame. And you're right. The point you bring up about, advancing to the next round and the millions of dollars you get, like, you have to share it with your conference. Who does Notre Dame share it with? They share it with themselves. So they're in an ideal situation. There's really nothing that any of us can do about it. I also do you guys think, now that the Big Ten has expanded to 18, there's still this clamoring out there to get Notre Dame in the Big Ten?
This probably kills that. I mean, they, on their own, they have been able to host a playoff game. To Elijah's point about the money, they get to keep that, and they're being successful. They're a better program right now and Brian Kelly got them to the postseason, but guess what? They're not overmatched anymore, especially on the defensive side of the football. They're fast, they're physical, and Freeman's had the answer, right? And they're able to pop their chest out in this first 12-team era, and there's no way you're gonna be able to reel them in.
No, and they have a TV contract that's coming up. So what does NBC do with them? But I just think, why would they leave? They embrace their independence. Now, will there be a point where teams won't schedule them? Or will you be like, man, for our fans, we got to schedule Notre Dame. It's going to be a benefit for both of us. I think one thing you brought up, Schmidt, is another part of the SEC and the rest of the college football. Watching the college football playoff, doesn't the SEC teams, which are always known for physicality and speed, doesn't it look like the Ohio States and the Notre Dames are a more physical team and have even more speed, or at least the same amount of speed SEC teams have? That used to be the advantage that they would have when you take the field?
Well, to be quite honest, I mean, you saw moments with Georgia where it was battering ram time by the Notre Dame running game. And at some point, there's just guys on that Georgia team that had enough. Kind of made me think of Nebraska, Tennessee, the bowl game, right?
Yeah, good point.
Where you just had enough sledgehammer duty. And the other thing, too, is you saw a lot of mistakes in that moment because Georgia typically doesn't play a lot of close games. And you saw captains and All-Americans with just bad penalties at horrible times on 3rd and 2 or 4th and 1, turns into 4th and 6, and you got to kick it. So that was uncharacteristic. So I think Notre Dame has been built for this. I think they've been well coached, clearly, and they just have guys that play really hard and are all about football. And I know that's kind of a cliche, but it's true. And an X-Man, the guy you know real well, Watts, I mean, he kind of embodies to me what Notre Dame's all about with how he stuck it out. He's taken to coaching. They've helped make him better, and he's been really good at that level.
How about him? He lost his shoe, so he faked an injury. I mean,
that's football IQ, baby.
But you know something Notre Dame did in that game, and Notre Dame kind of played Georgia games. You're right. Georgia will win a lot of 28-10 games, but you never had to feel like the team that was losing had a chance. And they're not always the most aesthetically pleasing. They suffocate you. Is Notre Dame won a game that usually Georgia wins? Notre Dame didn't even have 300 yards of total offense. Love ran for 19. But you know what won that game? Kind of to your point, Schmidt, about details, is they were good on defense. They took the ball away. They were also great on special teams. And football comes down to about 4 or 5 plays. If Georgia doesn't fumble early in the game and they put it in the end zone, what does that do to the game? It's that's like you watch these playoff games. Texas couldn't put away Arizona State, and they had plenty of opportunities, and Arizona State hung around, and then Arizona State had opportunities. It's just who can seize the opportunities, and there's 4 or 5 plays that, man, you got to hit on those, and that's kind of what it was with Georgia, and Notre Dame hit on their plays, and also coaching matters. Marcus Freeman outcoached Kirby Smart in the biggest moments of that game.
Quickly with Watts, Gary, why does it feel like in-state guys have a better chance of being developed and becoming first-round picks at places that aren't Nebraska? I'm trying to think who the last first-round pick from the state of Nebraska that Nebraska developed was, and I'm drawing a blank.
Is it the kid from that went at Creighton Prep and went to Notre Dame and his kid's playing now, the 6'8" freshman?
I think Spencer Long is the highest in-state guy that has been drafted recently. Well, him and Cam.
Kim and Cam Jurgens. Yeah,
it's been okay. So Jurgens gets to the Pro Bowl, and what a great thing this earlier this week. But that was when Nebraska used to develop in-state linemen. So now look what's happening. This 25 offensive line is going to have a lot of in-state guys, or we'll consider Grant Bricks essentially an in-state guy. So X-Man's recruiting. He was kind of slow played by Nebraska a bit, but I think he always had an interest to go away from home. Yeah. And Notre Dame, I'm telling you. I remember because he came into our studio, and actually maybe after he had made his announcement about Notre Dame, we had him in studio. The pull of Notre Dame is huge. I mean, look at the Rezaks at Westside. Notre Dame made a push for Carter Nelson. I mean, the helmets matter, but Brian Kelly, Notre Dame did a lot of groundwork. That was back when Nebraska took in-state guys for granted. They would recruit them, but they wouldn't continue to recruit them, if that makes sense. You'd make the offer, and then you'd be like, you know what, we're Nebraska. Where Brian Kelly recruiting the X-Man, they made numerous trips to Omaha. They watched him work out in their weight room at Burke. So they put in the time, and that really resonated with Xavier, who is a great young man. And he was like, I'm going to Notre Dame. And, it is time for Nebraska to have more of a higher hit rate on in-state players at Nebraska, but it's also been a shift of a lot of those guys are skill guys. Can Nebraska can develop, Nebraska high school football can develop wide receivers, but when they get to Nebraska, can you keep them there and develop them there? So we're not talking about every offseason, that guy's in the portal and boy, he looked great at Westside, or man, I remember that year as a junior when he was at Lincoln East catching passes from Noah Walters.
Speaking of that,
Junior Bryant's the guy. I get.
And I was doing some research. The last two in-state first-round picks from Nebraska, Adam Carricker and then Danny Noonan.
So Carricker counts as in-state because he's a Hastings guy.
Technically.
You had to go all the way back to Danny Noonan prior to Carricker?
Pride of Northeast.
Wow. That and now his son's there. Okay. That makes us all feel kind of old. And it also now, what about skill talent from Nebraska hitting, period, at any school? And I'm asking that because it feels like the recruiting has picked up quite a bit for the skill talent, receivers, especially. But they don't hit elsewhere necessarily either. Right? It's hard to think of the last skill guy. Or I put it this way, you can count them on one hand or less. Last 10, 15 years, skill guy from Nebraska succeeding and having a all-conference type career in college.
Do you count Niles Paul?
I think you'd count him as a hit.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, definitely.
You know, I'm sitting here in Fargo.
You have to go back, right?
I'm sitting here thinking in Fargo, if you want to go down to FCS, Easton Stick had a nice little career here.
There you go.
Marty Brown, who is a redshirt freshman from Creighton Prep, who was not recruited by Nebraska, is up for the top running back award in FCS. They announced that
by
tonight.
Sharmar, right?
I call him Marty, but they also call him Marty up here. But yes, Charmar. He had a twin brother that played at Prep. I don't know. You know, it's the change in high school football has also led to more wide open offenses. Like look at Millard South, for example. Millard South actually has a couple of linemen that are going to play Power 4 football, but they're known for their skill guys. You know, Westside has kind of been known for their skill guys. We don't have as much high school is running the old option where you're developing offensive linemen. Heck, let's even look at Cam Jurgens, guys. Cam Jurgens was a tight end in high school.
Yeah.
He was also recruited as an outside linebacker. And then he gets to Nebraska and they slide him down one spot to tackle. And then Frost says, hey, let's try it at center. And the rest is history, of course. So it's also, you look at a lot of the former Huskers that are coaching in state, there are a lot of skill guys. And 7-on-7 is taken off. So there's more of an influx of skill guys available. I don't know that answers your question on why when they get to Nebraska they can't develop.
Yeah.
I hope it's a trend that they can turn around because this state has a lot of young, skilled talent that's coming in the next 2-3 classes.
Mm-hmm.
The Iron Horse, Gary Sharp with us here. He is in Fargo. Kraynak is in. Elijah, Chris Schmidt, weekend edition. Go ahead.
And I'd follow up on that. Who are the in-state guys currently on roster that Nebraska can't screw up? I mean, I think Carter Nelson's a big one that you circle. They're the names that you look at of like, man, Nebraska's got to get the most out of this guy just based on, first off, talent, but B, kind of the narrative across the state if you want to continue getting other in-state Nebraska kids to come to Nebraska.
He would be at the top of the list. I would think on the back end, Donovan Jones and Caleb Benning. I don't think you're going to say, don't screw them up because I think they're both ballers. But those would be three that would be near the top of the list. I also think this, it might be just not a Nebraska thing, guys. I mean, has Nebraska developed skill players on the offensive side over the last 5 years? Or have the guys that have come in and have been good came from somewhere else?
And just remained good? Yeah. Right.
Like a Trey Palmer.
Yeah. Samore Toure.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Now Emmett Johnson is on that list, but he's not an in-state guy, but I'm talking about skill guys that come in here and they get better as their career moves along. I mean, even Adrian didn't get better as his career moved along at Nebraska for a variety of reasons.
God, that is tough to think about it. I mean, it's skill in general at Nebraska has been lacking.
Well, I think there's another thing.
Amon, right? That's another guy.
Again,
we're back.
I think.
Now.
Yeah.
I think also the
Can we
evaluation.
even say it when it's 30 years ago? Like honestly, that's a while. Like Elijah, not even a twinkle in our eye yet. He wasn't even anything, and I don't know if we can bring that up. Elijah, I don't know if we can bring up.
I remember a day from my childhood whenever I learned Amon Green went to Nebraska. I was like, whoa, I thought he was just the Packers running back.
Ah, right.
Yeah. I think another thing of all of this discussion is, Nebraska has had in the guys that coach skill positions on the offensive side, they've had a revolving door of coaches. That's why DeKale Shorts comes here and you can kind of see what he's doing. You're like, man, can you keep that guy longer than 2 years? Can you keep an OC longer than 2 years? Can you keep a running back coach that's, good? Can he stay a little while?
Well, and that gets to the question Big Red Junkies asked in the comments. When was the last time Nebraska had a difference maker at those assistant coaching positions to help with that development? I think Nebraska's had some dudes in here. They don't stay. Right, the assistant coaches have been in the transfer portal for a while, but at receivers, I think Nebraska's had some good receivers coaches, some good DB coaches, some good running backs coaches. They generally don't hang out.
Yeah, they don't stay for a while, or they get plucked and they go somewhere else. Or, right. I mean, you want to pull back the curtain even more is they butt heads with the head coach on philosophy and recruiting, and next thing they know, they're looking for their next gig.
No, a guy that I thought was pretty good as an assistant, always been a big Ron Brown guy, but I think Ted Gilmore. I mean, his receiver room was well stocked.
Hey, I'll tell you a guy who got knocked. Rich Fisher was a good wide receiver coach.
He did do a good job.
I know he was a golf coach, but man, he was a pretty good wide receiver coach.
Yeah.
Ted
got him here. Ted got him here. Ted left, and Fisher. Those guys flourished. I mean,
and let's not forget Norvell. Norvell was an assistant coach here, right? For a while. He's
Garrison and Papuchis. They did both a hell of a job with special teams, and good with the offensive line with Mr. Garrison.
The receiver guy with the gloves.
Keith Williams.
No. Well, he might have worn them too.
Oh, well, Jonte Williams was a DB coach.
DB coach, sorry.
Yeah.
They always out the gloves in
Yeah.
the teeth. Yeah.
Yeah. And he had the receiver's gloves because you know how DB's hands are. Yep, that's what it is.
I got to ask you, Sharpie, about Husker hoops, the opportunity against UCLA. Shout out to Black Hills Brennan, who's in the stream, and Steve as well, as we roll through some of the comments in the stream. But how big is today for Nebraska basketball? I say 6-2 in January here for that momentum to continue and the resume part of things as we look at March. But big one, man. You got the brand. We've talked brands earlier.
Yeah.
The brand of college basketball from yesteryear coming in. I love Mick Cronin, and this might be a rock fight, but it might be a little bit better of a game offensively than past Mick Cronin squads where it's offense is optional since CV Nebraska from a long time ago during the Miles era.
Yeah, that was an awful game. I was at the game. It was 2014. It was brutal. And the game went to overtime. It was god awful. But I think there'll be another one of those games today where you have to bring the boxing gloves. I love the fact that the students are out on break and the place is sold out. You know, PBA has become a real thing. And Nebraska performs differently there. I think this is a game where Alpha Bryce takes over. Whether he's good at the wing, he's good at the point. He's the guy that's got the ball in his hands. I think Nebraska is built to win a game against UCLA where they play in the low 60s. Can they make enough shots? But at home, they're a different team. I just think, Fred's transformation to realizing that in the Big Ten, you got to have solid guard play, but most importantly, you got to play defense. You're not going to win a lot of 86, 85 games in the Big Ten, and that they have leaned into it and guys have bought into it, and they built their roster where they can cover all three levels pretty much defensively, and their ability to switch. So I like this matchup. I think it's big for Nebraska. The only thing I don't like is when Nebraska starts getting attention. I think Nebraska basketball right now is good when nobody's talking about them. But now they're starting to get a little love, and rightfully so, because they've had a good non-con, and the metrics look good, and they're inside of the tournament for some. Some they're the first four, the last four in, the first four out. But today would go a long way. I think, don't you guys think, I've done the math, I think Nebraska's got to get to 10 wins, 10 more wins, and they're in the NCAA tournament with the value of what the Big Ten is going to do for you this year.
Gary, at what point you talk about the excitement that Fred Hoiberg has kind of brought to Pinnacle Bank Arena and Nebraska basketball? It's a real thing, the home court advantage, the love that Husker fans have for that basketball team. At what point do you think the conversation needs to shift from Husker fans from making the tournament to going on a run in the tournament? Is that ever going to be a part of the conversation in Nebraska? Or is that kind of one of the built-in advantages that Hoiberg has here, is low expectations because no one else has done anything around here?
Man, that would be awesome. But it's, it's all about matchups. We liked last year's team, and then they got matched up with a horrible matchup against Texas A&M. I don't know. I think, that's where you build your roster, where you're at the top of the Big Ten instead of in the middle of the pack. And so you're like, that's not just a team that can make the tournament. That's a team that can make the second weekend. But I think it would be a hell of an accomplishment to go back-to-back to the tournament. You lose Tominetta, you have Mass that's on the sidelines out this year with an injury. But kudos to them, man. They haven't had any hiccups. They haven't had that one game where you went, WTF, And, you'd like to hope that Creighton game would help you. Right now it's not, as Creighton's scuttling a little bit. But I think if Nebraska can help themselves, hold serve at home, win a game or two on the road where maybe you're not expected to, and avoid those bad losses and get to 10, I think Nebraska's in the NCAA tournament.
Who's most susceptible on the road this year in the Big Ten? I mean, I can't in anchor and pencil say that Nebraska's going to win in Iowa City next Tuesday. Does Nebraska go steal one at Maryland? I mean, I just don't know, because I look at road games as so tough. You end the year with, kind of a home and home split with Ohio State. Ohio State's good. They could sting you at home. They could also sting you in your gym. Nebraska's been immune to that because they're uber focused at PBA, but I just don't know where you pick up road wins. They have the talent to do it, but the Big Ten's been really fierce with their own schools protecting home court.
Yeah, I think that's why you also so you have to be really good at home and then steal one of those. Like, after Nebraska gets through with the game today, they got to focus on Iowa, and Iowa had no desire to play defense last night against Wisconsin, gave up 116. You would think you're going to get an angry Hawkeye team in Iowa City on Tuesday.
Yeah.
So I think you have to steal one or two on the road where you're not expected to win, but that makes it even more so. You got to be good at home. And Nebraska's been good at home. They're a different team playing at home. And the crowd, I mean, kudos. Again, the place is sold out today. There's no students, okay? It's not part of the package. And the place is sold out, and it's going to be great. I mean, how cool would it be if Nebraska wore red and UCLA wore their familiar road blues? That'd be pretty cool. I mean, I think it's pretty cool. I think, it didn't really hit me when UCLA football came into Memorial Stadium back in November. I think it'll hit me today to see UCLA basketball playing in Lincoln. That'll be like, damn, that's awesome. Pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. The way that UCLA has built their roster this year, the way that Mick built it, is a lot like what Fred is doing year to year. And what's, I guess, a little bit, you could expect that from a team that hasn't historically had much success and is not considered a basketball blue blood. You understand why you might have to go that route. But UCLA, right in one of the prime recruiting markets you could possibly be in, dripping in tradition and history, same deal. I mean, they're taking in transfers from USC, from Utah, from Louisville, all over the place. And those are the guys that are leading them and everything right now. Is that more of a model that we will see throughout college basketball? Or do you think maybe this is a one-time sort of reset for Cronin, considering last year was such a disaster by their standards?
No, I think you have to at UCLA. I mean, I think you have to win. So I think you construct your roster however. I mean, the reality in in football and basketball, the high school seniors getting screwed. Now we're going to have years of eligibility. Junior college guys are going to get extra too. I mean, we are just dumping on the high school football and basketball seniors and juniors. But I think at UCLA, you have to win. So you're going to do anything you can. I mean, here's the deal with William Kyle III, who is not playing today, just recently had surgery. And I still think I think he wanted to come to Nebraska. And UCLA took him by all the trophies. They took him into Pauley Pavilion. They showed him a lot of money.
Yeah.
They massaged the people that are handling William Kyle III. And he's at UCLA. I think Nebraska was really close on him. But, that's the advantage like UCLA to Nebraska is they not only have the success, they probably can dip into the bank a little bit more. And that's what they've done with their class. But it is a little bit odd for Cronin because I think Cronin likes the high school recruiting and Cronin likes a certain type of player. But they get after it, man. This is a good UCLA team. I think UCLA is one of the top 3 teams in the Big Ten.
Nope, they are. That's for sure. Yeah. Sharpie, we know you got to get out, stay warm, and enjoy Fargo. Find that all-you-can-eat steak buffet and fire it out.
Hey, it's going to be so. I flipped on the television just to see what the weather is, and on Good Morning America they said, and tomorrow in Fargo it'll be 30 below. Thank God I'll be waking up in Omaha tomorrow. I don't know how people live up here.
Oh, it's terrible. In your hotel in the parking lot, can you see like they have the stations where you can?
Yeah, like you charge your car.
Your car, yeah.
Yeah.
But not your electric vehicle, just your normal vehicle.
Yeah. You plug it into you pull your truck up and you just plug it in. So overnight you can get up in the morning and go start it. It's the people here are wonderful, and I think this downtown is really cool. But damn, it's cold up here.
How do you survive layers and whiskey?
Yeah. And stay away from the whiskey. Stay away from the wood chipper.
That might be a great name for either a horse or a bar.
Layers and whiskey.
Layers and whiskey.
Wasn't that the name of your band in high school? I think that's that was a good one. I still got that mixtape.
Guys, I appreciate it.
Jesse Pinkman tribute band.
Nice. Well, I gotta go get in the old wood chipper, eh?
Oh God.
Don't tootin'. Take care, dude.
Nice. Yep.
All right, there he is, Gary Sharp. Sharp will be with us tomorrow, along with Bill Dolman for the Average Joe Sports Show, Sunday live at 10:30.
Must be fun.
Kraynak, how?
Listen, these college football CFB 25 dynasties don't,
Good for you.
So they don't they don't work themselves, right? You got to do the recruiting yourself. However, whatever that takes. Got a good recruiting class coming in though. Yeah. So, I know. Yeah.
You making it
Trying to get
down?
out-
Are you braving the winter weather for Nebraska UCLA?
No. just the park and walk alone. You're just like, no, I'm good. Yeah, all kinds of weather. Well, there's an asterisk next to that, right? I think if it falls below 15, it's kind of where we draw the line.
That's
By the
fine.
way, so we're thinking Bryce Williams is the guy that has to go nuts. The problem is he's going against the former Defensive Player of the Year in the Pac-12, like 2-time, and could be the Big Ten's Defensive Player of the Year, and Kobe Johnson. I'm pretty sure that's who's gonna get the assignment. I do wonder about Bryce's ability. I like Bryce's ability when he is going against smaller defenders.
Sure.
He does a good job of overpowering them and using his size. But when he's got a guy that's equal in size and maybe better athletically, I'm not sure. The famous last words. But I don't know that I'd expect a ton from Bryce today because I'm assuming that's what UCLA is going to do, is to try to take him away. Him or a Sejan. One of those two.
Both are circled by Cronin and his crew.
But who does Johnson take? Whoever Johnson takes isn't going to do much.
I'll
Kobe
say
Johnson
this.
is an elite defender.
Well, and I think Sharpie nailed it. How does Nebraska handle the attention? Bryce has been such a great worker, such a good 3-level scorer.
He's never smiled. Did you know that? Have you noticed that?
He's focused, man, and he's working. I loved hearing from him this week about the leadership aspect and putting the Big Ten on notice, and be proud of the national accolades you've gotten from a Player of the Week standpoint. That's incredible, but that bullseye has gotten larger, and Sejan's also a guy that's been fantastic. My barometer is and always will be Juwan Gary, right? How is Gary doing? Because he's a defense first, shut you down, dive on the floor guy that has offensive talent and can score at the rim and hit from the outside from time to time. Morgan and Berke need to be all right. Mia is also. I mean, Nebraska's got a really good 3-headed monster of bigs to throw at the paint. I like Raleigh, I should say, a lot, but I need just really good ball security, and that's boring, but it's true.
Oof, yeah.
Because
Nebraska's been sloppy with it. They've been unforced too.
Yeah, and it's been dead ball crap, like just entry. I mean, so now the moments here, Brando and Ball are on the call. That's incredible. National Fox. I mean, it's cool.
Yeah.
And how do you handle it? I mean, you were feeling yourself, and then you go get annihilated by Sparty. If the offense isn't clicking, do you punt on the defense? Right? You can't. You can't today. You gotta be locked in for the full go of it, because right now, all right, are you the team that beat Creighton? Are you the team that beat? In that win over Creighton, I'm not going to sneeze at ever. You know what I mean? Because right after you beat them, they whacked Kansas.
Yeah.
I look at UCLA, where they got just edged out by the Carolina team that's still trying to find themselves, and they had their come to Jesus early in the year, losing to New Mexico, but they've also beat Oregon. They also beat Gonzaga. So they have righted themselves. Does Nebraska do that at home? Right, because this can be a deflator. This is a place you're not supposed to lose today. It doesn't matter who comes in.
Yeah, I don't know. UCLA has kind of the perfect mix to be able to go toe to toe with Nebraska, right? Because they're not coming in dependent on we got a hit from downtown.
Their mentality is we're going to muck it up and beat the hell out of you, and if we score 30 or 60, we don't care.
And so it's kind of like, who's better at it? Who's better at that kind of game today? And so that's why I'm glad you brought up Juwan Gary and Morgan. those guys are going to figure prominently because they have that same mentality.
You're your blue collar dude.
Where, well, yeah, they're the ones that would do well in Cronin's system.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little bit sort of counter to, I think, what Fred's instinct is, right? He wants to spread it out. He wants to score a lot, high volume.
He
wants to play that kind of game. Yeah.
Well, ideally it's free flowing and high scoring and tempo, and you move the ball and all that stuff. But I think he gets the Big Ten now. I mean, he's done a whale of a job of reinventing what it needs to be for Nebraska basketball.
Do you feel like, I don't know if this is a criticism. It's not really a criticism of Worcester. By the way, do we not pronounce the first R kind of like Worcestershire sauce or whatever? Like, is it Worcester?
No, I think it's Worcester. I think it's a Boston guy. Yeah,
it's Worcester. Raleigh Worcester.
Yeah, give me a Mark Wahlberg thick Boston.
I don't feel like he's taken control of the team yet from the point guard position. And you know where I'm coming from? And it's not so much a huge criticism of him because sort of how could you in this short amount of time? But I'm waiting for something to click with him. And again, not that he's falling down by any stretch. But I feel like point guards typically will have a more firm command of the team, and they play a certain way when he's in.
Is he okay not getting points? Is my question.
Yeah, I don't.
Just kind of running the show, and he's a dude that loves being physical, getting to the rim, and
he's huge. I mean, he's a huge point guard, right?
Yeah,
like he's really good sized point guard.
Yeah, I like him, but is he okay just kind of letting the game come to him versus going out and kind of marking territory?
Well, and part of it too is, out of inbounds plays, even on rebounds, Nebraska will mix it up. Who brings it up the floor quite a bit, right? Which is traditionally point guard territory. I wonder if there's something to that too when it comes to the ball handling, right? We're a little worried about the off the ball handling, or not off the ball, but worried about ball handling in sort of non-competitive situations, right? Nebraska's dribbling off their foot, they're throwing it away. I just wonder if more of it has to or should work through the point guard instead of spreading out that responsibility like Nebraska does right now. Because Nebraska's been used to playing too. Think about Hoiberg and all that. They've been used to playing with that point forward.
Yeah, the bigs brought it up to get the offense going.
Right, and Rink, a lot of the offense ran through Rink last year.
And then you had Derek beforehand. Yeah,
exactly. So now you have an actual traditional point guard. I don't know.
You've wanted one for years.
Yeah,
you've been a point guard away.
I just feel like he's capable of more, and so I'm not even blaming him. I'm not even saying that it's Raleigh that's blowing it. But in terms of sort of just taking command of that offense from a traditional point guard role, and helping to nip in the bud those turnover problems. Because look, guys, it could get ugly today, like straight up. UCLA, dude, they play serious defense, serious on the ball defense. They steal the ball I think they lead the nation, if I'm not mistaken, in steals, or they're close to it. They're in the top 10. So you got a team that can do that, plus a team that's sloppy with it. That is not good. That is not a good recipe for Nebraska. So like ball security is huge today. And I think you can fix those things if you kind of run everything through Raleigh. But we'll see.
Elijah, how we feeling? We going to get cross the river and put some heat down before a tip off at 1?
You can. I'm okay on that. Feel free. We picked this game yesterday. I don't think we're in agreement on where we pick. So, because you're on Nebraska, I'm on UCLA personally, and that's no offense to Nebraska. I just think what Mark has said is like UCLA, what they do defensively scares you. UCLA's overwhelming athleticism in a lot of places scares you. And also Nebraska's home winning streak scares me because all streaks must end at some point in time.
I think it's what Sharpie said, the attention part. How do you handle the attention?
Yeah. And I really worry about this one being one where maybe not the wheels fall off, but UCLA with that athleticism and aggressiveness defensively can really throw you off your game early, similar to what Michigan State did, where Nebraska got pushed around by Michigan State. Like, they showed up. They didn't like how the game was being officiated. I don't think against Michigan State. Michigan State came in and pushed them around in that game, and Nebraska kind of folded. I don't worry about Nebraska folding in front of the home crowd, but I do worry about a physical game getting away from them.
How do you react to getting punched? Right?
Yes, because UCLA has the ability to punch you defensively.
Now, here's a little hidden thing. It's sort of like, I guess, the equivalent of special teams in football, but
thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. Oh, sorry about that. Didn't mean to bring up such trauma this morning. Hoiberg on out of bounds plays is really freaking good. He's really good. And if it's going to be a low scoring game where the margin is a few possessions, like that matters a lot. Because UCLA is going to get their hands in passing lanes. Balls are going to get tipped out of bounds. You will have inbounds plays, quite a few. And Hoiberg's very good at that, like really good. I wonder what his conversion percentage is, but out of bounds plays, their conversion is solid. They usually get a guy open. They usually get a good look. So that's a little one of those like equivalent of hidden yardage type of things to watch today with Fred and his squad, because I think they'll have those opportunities, and you better scout Hoiberg defensively really well to stop those. Nebraska sneaks quite a few of those points, probably more than most teams.
What is Nebraska, in your opinion, Mark? If Nebraska does pull off the win today, we know what they need from Bryce Williams. It's likely 20 plus being that tone setter for the offense.
There's no way today. If they put Kobe Johnson on him, he'll be lucky to get to double digits.
Well, then who needs to be the guy that steps up and put some points in for you?
Oh,
that's where I'm trying to go with this game. Is I'm like, either Bryce needs to put up 20 plus, or who's going to step up? Is it Esijan with the 3-point shooting potentially? Like Burke in a revenge spot against the old team, but neither of those
teams needs to be efficient. I mean, he needs to hit some big answer shots, but to me, it's Gary. Gary's got to be your guy that's going to get you 12 and 10, and Bryce is your guy if it's going sideways to reel you back in and get to the free throw line spot, get to your spot on the floor to answer. That's his spot on the floor, and he hits the mid range. And then you at least get a bucket. You've had the reality of scoring droughts with Nebraska basketball. Death taxes and scoring droughts happen, and that's a real thing today with UCLA. And then that can affect your defensive intensity. So you need somebody, i.e., Bryce, to go hit an answer shot or all right, let's get back in rhythm, calm it down type response. You have that guy. And then what can you do getting everybody else involved? Don't force it, man. Just enjoy the moment. Don't force it, and then just inject that energy into your veins. The PBA will be a sixth man, so to speak, for you, that you will raise your level. At least Nebraska has the last 19.
I think Nebraska will have to get points in transition today, more so than I think they're going to have to score directly off of steals and things like that, because it'll probably be low scoring, right? That's what it feels like. It feels like it'll probably be a game in the 60s, around there. So folks like Hoiberg, actually, I think figure in pretty big.
I love his game. Right? I love his hustle.
It's just when you ask that question, Elijah, it's just like, I don't know quite what to do, because nobody really scores on them, right? Like, they're good at shutting down the perimeter. They're good at defending the paint. Okay. What's that leave? Mid-range, maybe sometimes?
Which is, let's be clear, the one area, like in modern basketball, like Hoiberg is very much a threes, layups, and dunks coach. He doesn't like a lot of mid-range shooting. Yeah. Bryce Williams kind of is the exception there because you trust him in the mid-range, but like Nebraska doesn't want, or Fred Hoiberg doesn't want his guys shooting mid-rangers. Yeah. And you look at UCLA and you go, oh, that's the one thing they allow you to shoot.
A coach that, and he's probably not the only one to do it, coach that I used to work with when I was doing games, on closely contested matchups, it's loose balls, rebounds, free throws, right? Loose balls, rebounds, free throws. That is what they would emphasize all the time when it was two teams that were pretty evenly matched: loose balls, rebounds, free throws. If you look at it like that, Nebraska could get some home cooking. They could get to the line. That might be really what you try to do to try to limit Kobe Johnson. He's a very good defender. Like I can't stress that enough. I think people will be like, you think of UCLA, you think of high flying, you think of up and down the floor, you think of Hollywood. No.
I think of O'Bannon and McLean and Tracy Murray and Tyus, Edney and even Love and Westbrook. I mean, the tempo guys, right? Now this is Mick Cronin and his anger at the world for being under 5'2".
Yeah. So you have elite defenders, a few of them, guys that are really motivated, that play with the chip on their shoulder. They keep the thing low scoring. They muck it up. So who are the ones that are going to get the loose balls? And you kind of like some of Nebraska's guys from that standpoint. You like Morgan, you like Gary, you like Hoiberg. Those are dudes that'll lay out, right? I want to say, Morgan, even against, I went to one of the near exhibition games really early in the season. I can't remember who the hell they played, but it was, it's like a 30, 40-point win or whatever. Second half, Andrew Morgan's diving on the floor with Nebraska up like 28. Up 28, this dude is like laying out Superman style to try to say, you're like, settle down, bro. It's like, but you appreciate the effort. So I think you can expect things like that today. It's going to be tough though. I don't expect Nebraska's offense to look great. I think you better come with some wrinkles that they maybe haven't seen or prepared for. I think folks like Bjugtensel, am I pronouncing that right? How do you guys pronounce it?
Bjugtensel.
Bjugtensel?
Bjugtensel.
Bjugtensel.
Berke.
Berke. Mm-hmm. Folks like him could come up big. Of course, he's going against his former team. Not a lot of his former teammates, though. I mean, they cleaned house. They brought in like 9 guys. And he's kind of tough around. Speaking of mid-range, at his height, he's a guy that can kind of pivot, turn around, hit an 8-foot jumper from the baseline. So you're gonna have to look for those. Mid-range will come up big. I really think it will. And then on top of that, is there something you could do to try to get Kobe Johnson in foul trouble? I mean, he's a real elite defender, but if he's out, I mean, he is a straw that stirs the defensive drink, right? So if you can get him in early foul trouble, and Bryce is good at getting to the line, you got some home cooking, maybe. There's a chance for that.
We'll see you down at PBA. Going to be awesome. That's Elijah Herbel, Mark Kraynak, Chris Schmidt. Reminder about what's happening here. It's Nova Nation needing to step up. The Supernovas in the 2025 season is almost upon us. Friday, January 10th. Be a part of history and celebrate that championship at CHI as the Supernovas take on the Atlanta Vibe and help raise that championship banner. And get ready for world-class talent that features Olympians, NCAA champions, All-Americans, plus the pro debut local superstars from right here in this volleyball state. Tickets on sale, supernovas.com. And get your spot reserved for history today. Get season tickets, get in-season tickets. And again, the season gets going January 10th at CHI with the Supernovas. Log on, supernovas.com. Kraynak, if you change your mind, there'll be a cold one waiting for you.
All right, man. Good to know.
All right. Elijah, you too.
You're the one that's using the old media pass today. You got the spot on Media Row today, not me.
We'll see. I mean, I am using it. We'll see where we're sectioned, but hey, it's in the building.
And it's a fair trade. I got Indiana, you got UCLA. We'll see what comes next. That's a fair trade for now.
Mm-hmm. We'll do paper, rock, scissors for the other Rutgers rock fight that looms. But thanks for tuning in. Appreciate all of you. Kobe has checked in. Good to have you. Audrey Schmidt. Miss Audrey. Need to get out to North Carolina and see Audrey. Doug is fired up for Nebraska basketball. Brian Snitley, also part of the Boulder Peace Treaty. and Brian, along with Charles checking in, and Moonbot. We'll talk to you next time with Hail Varsity Weekend Edition. Always like and subscribe. Hail Varsity YouTube, Hail Varsity Radio Twitter, and search Hail Varsity Radio, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Back at you Monday at 4.